Guys, welcome back to another episode of IOTA Poet. If you like IOTA and cryptocurrency, this is the channel for you. Today we have another IF member on the show. We have Austin, who's part of the Touchpoint team and works as part of the ecosystem development. We talked about some key topics in relation to Shimmer, including how is Shimmer going to compete in such a saturated market? Will the IF prioritize IOTA or Shimmer? What role can Touchpoint play in Shimmer's growth? Gamefi in IOTA, and many more topics. I have some very spicy guests lined up over the next few weeks. Everyone who interacts with these videos and supports the channels in whatever way you can is always so appreciated. It really does mean a lot, especially during this bear market. We really are part of an exclusive group. So if you want to see more interviews and IOTA content, please do drop a like and comment to help pump the algorithm, and I'll keep producing the fresh content. Oakley dokily do. Let's get into the episode. Enjoy. Austin, welcome.
Thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, and Austin, I know you've got an American accent there. As an English person, it sounds like it's like a Boston, but I could be very wrong.
It's funny because I'm on the East Coast and people from everywhere that I've ever been have told me that I have an accent, and I still to this day have no idea where it comes from. I'm not in the South, but I'm still not very I'm definitely not from up north, so we're right on what's called the Mason-Dixon line and of a unique accent.
It's great to have an American within the IOTA team. We were just chatting before this session that I think you're the only one, and maybe Dan as well.
From the Touchpoint team, yeah, and then I think in the IF there's a couple more of us scattered around, and it's definitely interesting. Like I said before, it's great to be a part of a community that is just completely different than what I'm used to culturally. And yeah,
that's it. Hopefully the IOTA community grows even more in the US, and we might come on to that later. But first of all, there's no better place to start than how you got into IOTA. So can you just give us an overview on that?
Yeah, so back in 2017, I guess like the first cryptocurrency that I had figured out about was IOTA, and it was actually after getting into investing probably for about a month. I used the app Robinhood when it was, first getting popular. And when I used that application, I had also done some research on Bitcoin, and I had seen that, well, it was actually a TED talk from a guy, I think his name was Dan Tapscott. He called himself the father of blockchain or something. And it was pretty interesting conversation that he was having. And I think that for me, what happened was I started to look at different stocks and the price of cryptocurrencies moving around. And it wasn't until I was actually bowling one night with my buddies in college. And the first thing that I saw was like the IOTA price went up like 65% or something in a day. And to me, that was like insane. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew that it was pretty cool because the first month or so that I had seen or that I had participated in investing in like little penny stocks and whatnot, and just kind of learning about investing as a whole, the movements were, 0.5% or 1%. And so when I saw that, I was like, okay, there's something going on here that I need to pay attention to. And that was really the first time that I was introduced to the IOTA community. And then after a couple of years leading into, or I guess last year, summer of 2022, I was reintroduced to IOTA. I made some connections with some of the team members, and that's how I got on board.
Oh, so at that point when you seen it go up 65%, you didn't invest?
I definitely invested.
Oh, you did? Okay.
That was the first time that I had started investing in crypto as a whole. And I had held on to my bags, and like I really did take on I had a very strong belief in what crypto offered. So anything that I held back in the day, I decided to hold on to throughout now. It's been a really interesting and crazy ride, as everyone who's, been here for that long knows.
Yeah, 100%. And let's hope there's some more twists and turns on the way, some more 65% pumps.
That'd be great.
Yeah. And especially with Shimmer. Okay, so you mentioned that you got back in recently. Can you just tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I was just kind of like, I spent the last couple of years researching DeFi, and I guess where my passion was I love helping people, right? And I come from a family of doctors, and I had worked in the medical field for a good bit, just kind of running a couple of offices. Towards the end of COVID, we lost our jobs because we had too big of a space to maintain and we just couldn't afford the rent. So when that happened, I really took back, my hobby of researching crypto kind of came to the forefront, and I realized that I wanted to get involved in it for real. And so I started looking around for, just different jobs or different roles that I could kind of apply for. And one of the coolest things to me is the ability to bridge builders with business people, or people that are more inclined to make business decisions. And I have this belief, because of my past experience, that there's a disconnect between business and the development side of things. And what I always wanted to do was become that bridge. And when I was introduced to Touchpoint and IOTA, that was just a clear thing that I would love to be a part of. Like, Touchpoint offers the ability for builders to have access to everything that they need, all the different resources, and one of those being trying to figure out how to position themselves, when presenting to investors or whatever it may be. But yeah, I guess the main idea is the fact that when I came across IOTA again and was introduced to Shimmer and Touchpoint, I had the opportunity to become that bridge, or at least to help out in that regard. So that's kind of how I got back in recently. And yeah, we're here now.
Yeah, that's quite unique then. So would you say you've got a developer background?
Definitely not. No, I think
Okay.
I actually studied economics in college, and I had no passion for, well, I would love to have been a developer, but I didn't have the work ethic, I don't think, to sit down and relearn it at that late of a stage in life. So if I would go back, I definitely would have tried to go the computer science route as well. But I just didn't do that. And so for me, the biggest thing was trying to help those people who did decide to make that choice, that maybe didn't have the ability to kind of interact with people in business as well. So yeah, that's kind of how I found myself here.
Nice. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who maybe don't have that developer background, but are passionate about blockchain and crypto and want to get into the space. So there you go. There's an example of somebody who's made that transition into it.
Yeah, I really do. I think that there's a place for people like that everywhere. Another way to say it is, I think that there's a lot of communities inside of crypto and probably elsewhere in other sectors of development, but specifically in crypto, where there's often these hard barriers to break through, where a community is already formed, and being a new developer in the space, you might not have your foot in the door yet, and getting that foot in the door can be quite difficult. And so for me, if I can help people get that foot in the door, that's really the bread and butter.
Yeah. Okay. And can you just tell us a bit more about your role within Touchpoint?
Yeah, so really it's mainly community management, where we are just trying to be there for whoever needs us. So at any point, the way the Touchpoint works is, the more that you want to get out of it, the more we can respond. So if people are at any point in their development stage, if people want to interact with our team or ask us questions, we're going to be that point person right there to be there, and not necessarily answer the questions for them, but connect them to the resources that might have the answers that they are searching for. I would say that we're very much so matchmakers. The big thing is, or the big goal I think in the future that we're going for, is the ability to kind of take a step back and let the matchmaking happen just independently of our Touchpoint team. But then, in the wider scheme of things, I think one of the bigger roles that I play is just trying to keep up with the overall sentiment in market of crypto, not necessarily regarding price always, but what's going on, what are the new trends. I think narratives obviously shift greatly all the time, but some of them are more sticky than others. And I like to kind of search and kind of just give my piece on to the wider IOTA Foundation, and specifically our Touchpoint team and community, about what I think is kind of going on. Yeah, I think that, or a simple way to put it is, I like to be a little bit of a strategist for us and just kind of look and see, what the future is going to entail.
Okay, and what's the dynamic of the team? Because I know Adam's on there, and is it Corey as well?
Yeah, so we've got Corey, Adam, myself, and Christian, and then Dan as well. It's very seamless. It's interesting because as an American, I have to get up pretty early to start the day. And then, these guys, they kind of end their day as my afternoon's starting. So we kind of cover the entire clock, which I think is awesome. Try and keep things going as smoothly as possible.
I've talked to Adam and Corey, and they seem super nice guys as well. Obviously, the next big step is the ShimmerEVM. Can you give us an update on how that's going?
It's going really great. I think the updates are coming as as we expect them. But I think that there's a little bit of like when things break that we need to kind of take a step back and make sure that things are going to work. And, something that I think is the most important message for our community is being patient here is the key. A lot of networks kind of push things out, as fast as they can, and things break. I mean, I don't want to pick on anybody, but I will. Like Solana is
Yeah, please do.
constantly down, and that sort of thing is just not. It's not as a longtime DeFi user. I'm never going to be inclined to use a network that isn't safe to use and it's not sufficiently secure. And I don't know the details technically about what they're working on behind the scenes, but I do know in our network that our developers are constantly working to fix the issues that come up. And the plan is that we're never going to release something that is not sufficient for our users and is not secure. So for me, I'm extremely excited about ShimmerEVM. I know that the testnet is right around the corner. As the testnet comes out, it should be a really interesting thing to watch for our ecosystem projects, especially inside of Touchpoint. Like what I can say is that people are extremely excited, and it's going to be really nice to see some of these projects that have been working for so long actually get to deploy these smart contracts and see people start to use them.
Yeah, and I suppose the argument is the more time you take to get the bugs out now, the shorter time it'll be in the public beta before it goes onto the mainnet.
Yeah, exactly. That's
how
yeah,
because those bugs are going to have to be ironed out anyways, aren't they? It's either seen in the closed testnet, I'd seen in the beta testnet to the public, but they're going to have to get fixed.
Yeah, 100%. I think that a lot of people want to hear news, they want these updates, but in reality, we've got to make sure that it's safe and secure. And again, we're trying to build something that's a little bit different than what's been here before. And I guess when I'm no developer, but I know that if I'm trying something that's never been done before, then it's going to be quite difficult to just come out and deliver right on the spot. So I hope that people understand that where timelines are great, the reality is of it for me is slow and steady wins the race. And as a user for a long time, I've used many networks. This is how I look around and expect the next chain that I'm going to go for is taking their development process.
Okay, so you mentioned that doing something new here that hasn't been done before with the Shimmer. I'm sure looking at the other spaces, lots of chains have EVMs. Mm-hmm. And they roll them out. So what's different between those EVMs and the ShimmerEVM?
Well, I think that there's going to be additional features, unique to.
I know this is probably more of a developer question, but I'm just wondering if there's any that come to mind.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it's the EVM isn't really where I would say that the bread and butter is for us. I think the EVM kind of unlocks this bridge for other ecosystems to onboard to our network. But it's really just this connecting our EVM to the Shimmer base layer is where the uniqueness kind of comes into play. I think that the way that I like to think about it from a non-dev perspective is all of these different networks are like these islands, and these islands have no way of communicating with each other except for these very, I don't want to say untrustworthy, but these bridges, which we've seen in the past, have enabled a lot of different hacks and a lot of money has been lost. And so what I think that Shimmer will offer is just this ability to kind of connect these islands. Yeah, I mean, that's in my opinion, a very unique thing that people have attempted to do through things like Cosmos, but it hasn't really panned out the way that people intended initially. So for me, it's, the uniqueness is Shimmer actually has the ability to stop the fractionalization of liquidity. And if we have the ability to kind of bring, I would say, users together in a more seamless way and fewer clicks, and I think that would be a huge value add to crypto as it stands today, but also it would, by having this more seamless interface, more people will be willing to be onboarded into crypto as a whole. So, I think that that's one of the big focuses for us is that we're trying to give a user experience that's not only great for the devs, but also for the users. And I think that, again, kind of going back to the pace of things, while we all want to hear updates are happening and the pace of things are moving forward, if we do it slowly, we take it the right way, then I think that we'll have a much better shot of being one of the next chains that onboards a ton of users.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point on when you look at the other ecosystems. You seem like well-researched fellow on crypto and other ecosystems. So for example, I was looking at DOT the other day, and they've had smart contracts a while now. I could be wrong here, but looking outside in from their ecosystem, it feels like to me, DOT has got no traction at all in DeFi, or very little. I mean, do you have any ideas why?
Well, I mean, from my personal perspective, I think it all comes down to when it gets to this level of which chain to choose from, it comes down to personal preference. And for me, it's always been about user experience. I don't think that everyone has the brain power of these, super smart people on crypto Twitter. It's often very intimidating to use dApps on these other chains where it's just extremely difficult to get to. And so for me, I think it's awesome that their tech could be incredible. I'm not too, versed in the details of what they work on, but I know that I was a huge fan of them back in the day. And they have great ideas. And I think that what it comes down to is who can deliver an experience for a user base that is simple enough to allow them to experience and learn. And I don't think that that's quite happened for some of the original networks that we've seen. I mean, and this is not common in some of the networks that have been around from the early generations of smart contract chains. I think that we kind of realized that in order to succeed and stand out amongst the rest of these layer ones, we have to do the smart contract thing. And I think everyone knows that, but the ease of use of these smart contracts is really where we're going to be able to see our nascent ecosystem kind of thrive.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I mentioned DOT, because I get the impression that Shimmer and IOTA are trying to be this layer zero and this, and connect to all these different layer ones and layer twos essentially. And DOT and I suppose Cosmos are in that space. In fact, I do have a video on this on my channel, so do check it out, where I talk about how I feel IOTA's superior to DOT and Cosmos. One, obviously, maybe not right now because IOTA and Shimmer don't have smart contracts yet, but once the vision was achieved, then it could certainly compete. And it's just interesting to me how DOT hasn't really seemed to have taken off for me. I mean, you could argue Cosmos definitely has a lot more traction and network effect. Maybe as well Cardano. I don't really know too much about their system, but they do seem to have a big ecosystem.
I think that from my perspective, when you say layer zero, I love that. I love the term itself, and I as a user of Ethereum and the layer twos that have been coming up for the last couple of years. For me, what I would love is this idea that Shimmer becomes or layer zero, where we kind of do just become this bridge between ecosystems. I mean, I remember back in the day, Cosmos used to say they were the ecosystem of ecosystems. Yeah. And I think that that's something that's really needed still. I think that we definitely have the right idea. Our team really does know what we're going for. And the fact that, we're starting with the EVM is, it's just really exciting to me.
I suppose that's a key point, and the EVM is just the starting point, isn't it? Shimmer's only goal isn't just to be an EVM chain. So in the future, there's going to be, is it WASM they call it as well?
Yeah. Yep. I think there's going to be the idea is to really just be compatible with, or I guess you could say just to become VM agnostic. And that's really the approach that I would take. And I think that our team's kind of pushing in that direction. Now, I this is probably way down the road. The way that I like to phrase it is that proximity to Ethereum matters. And so that's why I think that it's really smart that we're taking the approach of going EVM first. And then WASM probably be on the back burners, but it's definitely in the works.
And I think that the adoption point touches upon one of my next questions. Because again, I just want to play devil's advocate for a second here. But there's a lot of EVM chains out there, and it's quite saturated. If you want fast transactions, there's a chain for that. If you want Rust language, there's a chain there. There's NFT marketplaces, there's DEXs already. How does the IF use its limited funds and Touchpoint as well to stand out and compete?
Yeah, this is one of the drivers that brought me here, is the fact that we've been talking a lot about these other layer ones where they're able to kind of throw money at projects left and right, and just throughout the past couple of years, and that's great, but it doesn't really create any sticky developers there, because a lot of times people are chasing the funding. And I think that to break out of our bubble, what we offer is something completely different, and that's this complete support for developers, business people, whatever you are, whatever your team needs. Or we kind of have this platform that allows you to just get your foot in the door real easily, and then use the people around you to your benefit. And it's just it's a mutually beneficial environment where other networks kind of lack. And so for me personally, I think that this is one of the bigger ways that we're going to figure out how to break the bubble. For me personally, and just being on the Touchpoint team, I'm a little biased, but I really think that this assistance to the developer experience is something that makes us stand out amongst others. And as we start to expand and as the EVM launches and mainnet launches, then I think that we'll have no problem kind of jumping out of our bubble and just kind of getting the traction that we're all looking for. And I think that, one of the other massive points I don't think I've mentioned at all in this conversation is just the fact that this community is so strong and so big. Like, there is something to be said about the IOTA community. And I think that it's a pretty powerful tool in and of itself. And when people are looking for liquidity and this liquidity opens up, the floodgates will come in. People will be looking to access these sorts of applications because there's a ton of people that are going to be able to actually use smart contracts for the first time. Now, I mean, like, the caution that I want to give to everyone is, we want to make sure that when you do jump in for the first time, like, you understand what you're doing. And I think that that's kind of one of the most important things that new users can think about. It's like, take things slow, and you will be rewarded just based on the knowledge that you're starting to attain and the experience that you're getting. But yeah, I mean, I would say that, the two ways that we break out of this bubble is first and foremost, the community itself. Like, that is what people want. They want liquidity, and we offer it. We just don't have it just yet, not until the mainnet launches. And then the second thing is we offer developers something that they do not get anywhere else. And I know that because we talk to projects from all over the place, and the same thing kind of comes from everyone. There's ways to get funding, but once you get that funding, you're kind of left out there to, on your own to dry. And that's really just not the case in our ecosystem. So it's, that's probably how I would describe how we're going to break out of it.
Yeah, I mean, the community point's so key. Again, this isn't just a shit on dot episode, but again, I look at the dot community and it's nowhere near as active as IOTA from what I can see, even though it's got a way higher market cap.
It's very awesome that, that IOTA decided to do, or that IF decided to bring on smart contracts, because it puts us into a position where now we can pivot again. And we can kind of take the role. We can go the layer 0 route if we end up deciding to do that, or we can go a completely different route where we focus more on providing a public good infrastructure for our ecosystem to kind of benefit from. And it doesn't matter where we go, because we have the ability to shift. And again, like, when you think about this concept, in addition to the fact that we have limited funds, a couple of weeks, months, whatever it may be, and it's definitely not on these venture-backed L1s.
Yeah, and on that, I mean, I must admit, I was struggling because, I'm a 2017 OG kind of guy when it comes to IOTA. I know there's a lot of people out there, and we got into it because the market adoption, the IOTA, the real world usage. So I think for me, it took a little while to get my head around this Shimmer, smart contracts, etc. Even up until recently, I was still, where's the market adoption, etc. But I've been thinking more and more about it, and at the end of the day, if you look at most businesses out there, they end up pivoting in some way. And I think that's what the IF's had to do, because the IOTA market, even with the best intentions, just isn't there yet in terms of adopting blockchain. So I think the IF did take quite a brave decision to focus more on the Shimmer and smart contracts. It could have just kept going on the course it was doing. It's taken this decision, and I think it has a lot more of a hope now of surviving long term.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's a great point. I think the ability to pivot is something that I'll go into a couple of examples here, actually, because I think that it's important. But there's projects out there that started off as, individual DApps, and then they turn into an L1 or an L2, and, now they're, flip-flopping, they're pivoting again. And, we actually get to see it in real time. But two examples that I use, and I'm definitely not a shill for Polygon because I don't like using it at all. But okay. I think they're now coming out with the ZK-EVM. But back in the day, Polygon, like, I don't even know where they first started, but they've been ahead of the game in terms of pivoting or in altering their goals. And
yeah,
more than Polygon, I would say there's an app specifically that I love to use, and it's on Arbitrum now, but it's the GMX protocol. And GMX, like, the reason that I love to use it, it has nothing to do with anything other than like how the DApp works. But the interesting thing here is the fact that they've rebranded and pivoted like complete 180s multiple times throughout the years. Like they started as a project that did X, now they're a project that does Y, and today they're a project that does, X, Y, and Z. And I think that it's a really nice thing to be able to see when a team can do something like that. I like another great example would actually be Binance Smart Chain, where there was a need for a low cost fee or a low cost alternative to Ethereum layer 1 back in the day. And that, like, as soon as that happened, as soon as the ability for people to use BNB chain existed, I mean, you saw that there was just so much liquidity that flew right to them. It's just it's awesome to see that we were able to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, me and you both come from more of a business background and a developer background, and work with enough businesses you see that pivoting and is key. And you can feel that you have the best idea ever, and it may be a good idea, but it just isn't the right time. And you almost have to listen to what the market or the environment's telling you. I mean, look at Apple, for example, where they basically started off as like a home computer company. And now they sell all this like different tech, and they're probably most well known for the iPhone now. Yeah, so you're obviously in touch with projects outside of the ecosystem then as part of Touchpoint. What sort of feedback do you get from the other projects?
Yeah, I think that for the most part, there's a ton of interest, right? Because again, like there's the two things that we like to add and that I love to leverage when I'm having these conversations with other teams is we do have touch points. So a lot of newer projects really do enjoy hearing that. And then the more experienced, or I guess the more full-fledged projects that have been in existence for a little bit, but maybe are home networked elsewhere, they definitely are more attracted to the fact that the IOTA community is massive. And so when mainnet launches, I think that we're going to have the ability to kind of onboard a lot of projects that are just going to not fork themselves, I'm sorry, but expand to this multi-chain, to our chain. And yeah, I mean, that's definitely the approach that I take in terms of outreach. The feedback is pretty constant. People want the mainnet. There's so many different L1s to launch on. So there's really two drivers for them. It's either funding or access to liquidity. And I think that again, once we have the ability to launch the mainnet, there's going to be a lot of people that are just willing to come in. My goal is to kind of we encourage this inside of Touchpoint, and we're trying to encourage the community builders to do a little bit of this, and they are, but bringing on these upper level DeFi products that have proven to be successful. Tokenomics is a huge thing to me. That's probably the biggest focus that I have in terms of what I like to bring to the table for different projects. And the fact of the matter is, I think that a lot of projects need to reconsider or consider how the token is going to pan out after 5-10 years, because if you're really looking at a 1 to 3 year outlook, it's not great for your user base, and it's not great for the community. And so for me, I really do focus on, like, when we're trying to break out of the bubble, bringing on projects that have kept that in mind, or bringing on people that are looking to fork projects that have done well, or maybe have fallen short specifically for one feature of their tokenomics, and are looking to do something a little bit different, or kind of iterate on it in a way that will make it more long lasting.
Are you interacting with a lot of projects at the moment?
Yeah, I talk to projects constantly. I mean, they're mainly, I would say that it's more so just kind of having conversations now, getting, trying to create relationships and whatnot.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because as an outsider, and I'm sure the audience as well, we always wonder, what is going to attract projects into the ecosystem and what are they looking for? But as you said, that it seems to be either funding or the access to the liquidity for their dapps. That's an interesting.
It's us.
Yeah,
it's really us. It's all of you guys that are that have just been waiting, and it will pay off eventually. I really think so. And it's been awesome to be a part of this community.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting dynamic between the IOTA network and the Shimmer network, and whether they can live together beneficially or whether one will subtract from the other. For example, I think there was a bit of drama on Spec the other day where people were talking about how an IF member mentioned on a podcast that consideration is holding back releasing the EVM on the IOTA mainnet to help grow activity on the Shimmer, because maybe they were scared that was going to take away some activity from Shimmer. I'm just wondering what your thoughts would be on that.
Well, what I would say is this. I think that the Shimmer network is here now, and like the approach that we have is that this is what we're able to do is really we're able to break things on the Shimmer network, and we're going to be able to bring that and port those success stories to the IOTA network. And while like I understand the idea of fractionalizing liquidity is not necessarily the end goal, the real amazing thing is this is the opportunity for people to get started, and just like play around and enjoy like smart contracts for the very first time. And then I think that as things mature, there will be a very like the goal is to kind of create this seamless, I would say, the seamless connection between networks. And that doesn't limit itself. That's not limited to connecting Shimmer to other EVMs, or like, to connect Arbitrum and the Ethereum mainnet to Shimmer. It's also inclusive of connecting Shimmer to IOTA. And I think that, from my perspective, as long as you can utilize the tokens on both networks, and it really doesn't matter where the network or what the percentage, I guess, of token holders are going to be, using Shimmer or using IOTA. And also, if you think back to Kusama and Polkadot, what it allows us to do is kind of avoid the situation where we're looking to fork because the community becomes split. Now you have two networks right off the bat where we're really just kind of going along the same path right now. And then eventually, if the community decides to, we can take Shimmer one direction and IOTA another direction. That's always been my outlook on it. I think it's awesome to be able to see people test and break things and like just push the limits. And then like the idea of becoming an interconnected like network of other networks is just like what I've always wanted. So, I understand the idea of fractionalizing liquidity, but I really do think that the most important part here is, as long as you can utilize the Shimmer token and the IOTA token for or around the DeFi ecosystems, both on Shimmer and IOTA, then it shouldn't be too big of a deal. And I don't know too much about the concern about delaying the smart contracts on IOTA. I just know that from my conversations with the dev team and whatnot, we want to make sure that IOTA doesn't have any issues when the smart contracts launch. And the way that we're going to do that is by taking this slow pace in terms of the Shimmer development. And yeah, I hope that answers it. I know that that's often a question that gets asked, and it's a tough one to answer from my perspective. But I really do.
I know there's obviously probably more development aspects as well you can throw into that answer, that if we had a dev on here, they would be able to answer. But yeah, I get that. I think there's just some people concerned that maybe Shimmer would sort of get more of the spotlight than IOTA, and then IOTA fades away, which I don't think is going to be the case. But I was just interested in terms of the vibe that you get from the IF and what their focuses are.
Yeah, I don't really think that the IF is looking to phase IOTA away. I think that there's a very strong goal here, and that's like really we talk about it a lot, where we're just trying to make sure that when the IOTA smart contracts are live on IOTA, it has been battle tested to the T. Even today, I'm not too certain about like the token price of Kusama versus Polkadot. I know that, and neither of them are doing great, right? But
well, nobody is, yeah.
No one is, and so like, if it comes down to network activity, that's one conversation. But if it's about token price, I think that it's something that isn't necessarily that important right now. I mean, in the future, like when the time comes when there's decisions to be made by the community is going to have the ability to make these decisions. That's the most important thing. Like, we're working towards the quarter side, and we're trying to make sure that we're going to give the community the power that they need in order to make this a more decentralized network that kind of is driven by like what we all want, not just what the IF wants. I mean, that's kind of the way that I would phrase it. It's like we're doing the best that we can now to make sure that in the future we kind of have the ability to become that decentralized enough network that can go in multiple directions. I think that this is a point that I make to my buddies all the time, but like there really isn't anything that's decentralized. And I think that I read somewhere the other day, it was some Twitter account that I'm not really a huge fan of, but he's pretty well known. But he said something like I'll have to come back to that one. I'm not too sure.
That's fine. That's fine.
I gotta find it, but I don't want to say that wrong. I just I mean, I really think that it's not too important to focus on the division of Shimmer and IOTA, because Shimmer is here for IOTA.
And as you said, I think the IF just need to start building some momentum, and then they can make those decisions down the line and adapt it to help IOTA, essentially. I just want to change.
Yeah, I mean, like,
yeah, so you go ahead. So I'll let you finish this point.
Okay, yeah, like I kind of came back to me.
Yeah.
This idea of being decentralized as possible is something that I always like to talk about with my buddies and people that like I talk to about crypto, because decentralization is very hard to reach. And I think that when it comes down to it, a lot of you want to put decision-making power in people's hands that understand, not just anyone. And like, this is something that I've had to grow into, because I really I'm totally for just like complete decentralization. But at the same time, there's you do want thought leaders that have a good idea of what they're talking about and how building works, to be at least like spokespeople or respectable individuals that people can kind of look up to, and not necessarily copy what they want to do, but it's better to have an understanding from people that understand better than you. And this is how I personally feel. Like, I love to ask questions to people that are smarter than me, because a lot of times I don't want to form my opinion based off of half information or just slightly less information than others. And so I do like to put my trust in people that have put the time and effort to really understand the nitty-gritty of what these decisions and what the different outcomes can possibly be.
Okay, great. I agree. I mean, this is a bit of a side tangent here, but do you think something can ever be fully decentralized?
It's interesting. I mean, like, I think that like the term itself is just tough. So probably not. I think that, like, at some point there's got to be some people, like, I don't think there's one vote for everyone. It's a very hard thing, because if you do have that one vote for everyone, then if the majority of people are convinced in one, like, are just like misinformed, then like chances are down the road decisions will be made that might not necessarily, I guess, the best for the long term. And like, this is completely independent of our network or any other network.
No, it's just a philosophical question I felt come up.
Yeah, it's a really tough one to think about. And I really have always just been, decentralization matters, like that sort of mentality. But I think that when we really talk about it, it always comes back to me. It's like, okay, you know what? I don't think that I would want my baseball coach to be like a soccer expert or a football fan, or not a football fan, but a football coach. Like, I want him to, have like some experience inside of baseball.
Yeah, as you said, like, I do feel at some point, and again, I started off with this thought of, everything needs to be decentralized, give the power back to the people, essentially. But I think, especially when you look in business and startups, there's always got to be a period at the start, especially where there's this centralization of a few key people just driving stuff forward and making decisions early on that benefit the project going forward, and they have a key direction. Because sometimes I feel one of the key risks is decentralization can maybe slow stuff down and maybe give stuff less of a direction if people are just constantly arguing over what's the best approach to begin with. But yeah, I mean, that's a philosophical point maybe for another episode. Maybe once the ShimmerEVM is released, we can do another episode and we can go into decentralization. I'd love to have a chat about that with some key people in the IOTA community. Actually, maybe I'll do an episode one day.
That'd be awesome.
Just have like a topic of the week and we just discuss it.
I would love that.
Yeah. So the next question I have, and I know we're time's ticking on, so I do want to get through a few more questions quickly. Is each cycle there's usually like a couple narratives that take over, and those projects really benefit from those narratives. So I don't know about you, but for me, I feel the next one is in the next cycle is Gamefi. Gaming dApps coming through. I did have a look through the Touchpoint Discord, and I did see you did comment a few times on Gamefi. So I'm just wondering, what your thoughts on that, and are you aware of any Gamefi dApps coming to Shimmer?
So yeah, there's definitely like, I have thoughts on this because I grew up a gamer, and I think like I could actually attribute some of the MMOs that I used to play when I as a kid. Like, that's those in-game economies are what drew me into like crypto, honestly, like in the very beginning, and or at least DeFi, I would say, like not necessarily Bitcoin, but yeah, like when I first got into DeFi, it was like I was playing a video game again. So I mean, I got a ton of thoughts here. I think that I was an early user on Axie Infinity, which was really cool because like I was hesitant to start because I was like, okay, the game looks dumb, it's like these little fake Pokemon things, and like, it was
Yeah.
interesting, but it wasn't necessarily, it didn't like draw my attention until I realized, until I read about the scholarship programs, which if you're not familiar with that, really like these games were allowing for people in these like underdeveloped countries to effectively make a larger wage than their current jobs. And I know that likely wasn't sustainable when we saw that with the collapse of a lot of these inflationary tokenomic game modes or game models. But with that being said, there was a concept there that I think was proven for at least a short period of time, where like people love to be a part of games, like or gaming communities. And this is at least my approach. The games that come in from like the Web 2 or traditional world that just implement some sort of like on-chain mechanisms, or like, in other words, like, let me put it very straightforward, like if you use cosmetic items in games, I think that that's how you're going to get crypto gaming or GameFi to really start to buy. Whereas inflationary tokenomics, as we've seen with DeFi projects like Olympus and whatnot, it just is a little bit less likely to have success, because you've got to create a sustainable model. And I think that Counter-Strike is a perfect example of one of these games where people are able to buy skins. We see that people are addicted to this, and they can't transfer these skins. Well, I mean, they can on Counter-Strike, but in a lot of other games like Fortnite or Apex Legends, you can't transfer the skins. You just buy something that's not really limited. But if you incorporate like this sort of on-chain or NFT type concept to your games, where people can actually earn a skin that's very rare, it only comes out 10 times a year or whatever it may be, and then just kind of throw that layer on top of the actual game, like that's really where I see value in GameFi. Like I'm not the biggest fan of just creating these like GameFi tokens.
Yeah.
But I really do think that there's something to be said about like actually having the ability to trade cosmetic items on top of your existing games, or like if you're a sports fan, like actually paying for like, rather than having to pay for your ultimate team every year.
Well,
If
yeah,
you're
exactly. I was going to say that I used to be addicted when I was at university and maybe slightly younger to FIFA and the Ultimate Team. And I mean, I used to like trade on it and stuff, so I didn't spend any money, but I know loads of people did spend money. And it just seemed crazy to me that people would literally spend hundreds of pounds on this game
yeah,
for effectively 6 months, and then it would die down a bit. Then, next year the new game would come out and you would start again. And you've already paid, 50, £60 or, $80 or whatever it is for the base game. And then you've got all these costs on top as well. So it just seems so inefficient.
yeah. And I mean, like that's like that inefficiency is something that can be solved. And I think that like in the near future, we're definitely going to be able to see that. And yeah, I mean, I believe the GameFi is definitely one of the drivers that's going to bring like a ton of people into crypto. I mean, if there's an account that's not really associated with any chain, but it's definitely, if you're interested in like checking out some like very cool games,
Oh yeah,
it's
drop that.
Oh Baby Games is the Game Foundation. This guy Passy T, Passy like Tee, I think it is, on Twitter. Like I love watching them develop their stuff. Like it really is just so cool. They're making like old Nintendo games, on chain and whatnot, like with crypto Twitter characters. It's a pretty fascinating spin on gaming, and I think it's one
What
of
was that
the
name? Sorry?
Passy T and Oh Baby Games, I would say.
Passy and Oh
Yeah,
Baby.
I've actually, this
Shout
is
out.
someone, yeah, if anyone's got a connection to them, I've really tried to get them, to, or at least get into contact with them, but I've never had any luck yet. So, I mean, they're definitely very busy, but it's a pretty poppin' account. And I would say that if you want to take a peek or get some ideas of how GameFi is kind of looking to go in the future from I would say, from the crypto community builders, as opposed to the traditional gaming builders that are coming to Web3. Like this is the type of person that I would follow. And yeah, but as far as, yeah, like actually I was super impressed by, I'm gonna name this one Touchpoint project because I was like extremely impressed by what I saw today. Dark Mythos looks really cool. That's all I gotta say. Like that, they are doing a fantastic job with their artwork and just like the actual interface on on their platform. So I'm super excited to see what they build. And there's definitely a ton more inside of Touchpoint, but you'll have to join Touchpoint to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot more of this Dark Mythos. I'm seeing quite a lot mentioned on Twitter of them. Some sort of fantasy card game. Yeah, well, shout out to Dark Mythos if you're listening, Dark. Get in touch. I'd love to chat to you. Great. Well, I mean, as I said, it's great that we have some dApps joining and hopefully a lot more, because I think such an easy way to get adoption in the ecosystem, because gaming just lends itself to currencies, as you say. Okay, one or two more questions to go. I think you've already touched upon it there, but are there any other Shimmer projects that excite you, or do you have to say a bit neutral?
I mean, I think it's best to stay a bit neutral, but I will say that inside of Touchpoint, we've done these more recent updates with some projects, and they are. I think there's a lot to be excited for. As a DeFi user, there's some stuff that's going to be very nice for people, and I think that as a new user, these builders are catering towards people that are not necessarily the most familiar with playing around in DeFi, but there's DEXs, there's like NFT platforms. We're trying to bring on some NFT finance sorts of things. And the marketplaces that are being built, they're looking good. And I really am like, it's exciting to see. I'm actually very proud because, there's a lot of projects out there in the wider, like not in our ecosystem, but the wider ecosystem, that they just kind of replicate what they see elsewhere. And I think that the fact that our Touchpoint builders are they're really iterating and they're doing some good stuff. I'm excited to see it.
Great, yeah. Let's just get the ShimmerEVM dropped and watch it grow.
Yep.
Big announcement today. Bitpanda basically listed Shimmer. So if you're listening to this is probably a few days ago now. But yes, that's a huge announcement. Is there any other exchanges in the pipeline?
Yeah, definitely. The goal for us is to kind of get onto the radar of some of the larger exchanges and not necessarily focus on trying to pick up very many of the I would say lower tier exchanges. I think this is one of the best ways to access different communities around the world. I would as an American user, I think that it's really important that we onboard some of these American exchanges, just because I think that they're very different. And I guess to be fair, as an American, I'm quite unfamiliar with a lot of the exchanges that you guys use, because it's just a different, I guess, legal issues, and obviously it's a little bit.
What exchanges do you use?
Yeah, so I actually started I started on Coinbase, and that's kind of always been my on and offboarding mechanism. But as soon as I could, I started to figure out how to use a DEX. And once I figured out how to use a DEX, I avoided exchanges at all times. So actually, when I first started, you could use Binance.com in the United States. I don't really know. I think there just was no regulation at that point in time. And it was really interesting because using a centralized exchange, while it's great in order to trade and whatnot, I wasn't really much of a trader. I was more of a swing trader, I guess you could call it, or a holder. And I very quickly learned to take my stuff off of there and bring it on, get on a cold storage wallet, and just start to play with the tools that the community was building, because I feel like it's a lot more simple to navigate a decentralized exchange than a centralized one. But you obviously have to kind of learn the ways of how to navigate these sorts of things. But it's definitely, my advice to anyone would be try and avoid centralized exchanges once you've been onboarded, and then kind of utilize the community, because that's the most important part of this, is that we build stuff that people want to use and learn as they go. One thing that I would say is, over the years, I have used BlockFi, I used Celsius, I never used FTX because it was just I already had other centralized exchanges. But it was very clear to me that some of these things were not doing so hot. I did not expect FTX to collapse, but I think that very early on there was a lot of noise about Alex Mashinsky at Celsius, and there was some arrests that happened well before this thing collapsed. And so I think that while the trust for traditional people who are not necessarily crypto natives, they're more inclined to trust these institutions, but a lot of what crypto is about is creating these alternative solutions to these I mean, less transparent and quite unfair institutions where, like you said, they're making a profit off of you. And I just think that it's very important as people, come in to or as new entrants to just make sure that they're focused on who's behind some of the things that you're using, because it really does matter. And you don't want to put yourself in the position to kind of get rugged or to have, a legal binding, or to have a company go bankrupt with your funds in it. I mean, that just is so sad to me. But again, like there's some rules of thumbs inside of crypto that, we're told at a very early, that everyone should know before you get in. And like holding funds on exchange or on like off chain is just not the way to do it. So
yeah, that's some interesting input, and I feel like I could chat to you for hours about crypto and the current condition of the market, but it seems unfortunately we're running out of time. But maybe in the future, I really do like that idea of getting together some discussions, and various people across the ecosystem can come together. I think it might be quite interesting for the audience to listen to. So maybe I'll look into that in the future. But I just want to ask you one final question then to close this out, and that is, what can we expect to see from yourself, or maybe more Touchpoint, over the next, couple quarters of 2023?
Yeah, I think that this is really cool. This is a big focus right now. It's how are we going to kind of position Touchpoint to break this bubble? And what you're going to see from us, like specifically me and my team, is a little bit more promotion on Twitter. I'm a retweeter. I don't like to tweet too much, but I'm going to start doing it a little bit because I think that it would really benefit our community. And yeah, I mean, I think that that's like the first thing. The second thing is we want to kind of, I don't want to say Touchpoint on its own, or brand Touchpoint as its own entity, but we want to kind of separate ourselves a little bit from the foundation and make it more of a community driven experience where like we want to be able to rely on our community members to kind of self-sufficiently, and I think I said this in the beginning, but sufficiently like cater to each other's needs, where we're able to kind of oversee the actual process of matchmaking and setting up the channels and whatnot. But the greatest thing for us is the ability to kind of take a step back and watch the ecosystems actually grow on its own. And what we've seen in the last couple of months has been that this is actually happening. There's like groups of projects that are working together to like make sure that there's like some seamless user experience when the time comes. And like I love that. Yeah, in addition to that, I mean, like, we're really going to work hard to onboard some of the upper level DeFi projects and hopefully get some very interesting teams to start working with us. I think that's probably the biggest thing for me, is to when the time comes, onboarding some projects that I think will make people really excited to come to our network.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the big announcements. I think there's going to be some big moves this year from the Touchpoint team. I know you're working hard behind the scenes, so I can't wait to see what that brings to the table.
Yep, there's a couple that are in the pipeline now, and everyone will hear about them soon, but I'm not allowed to say yet.
Oh, NDA. We don't like NDAs, but we do like it when they're lifted. So hopefully soon we'll hear exactly what you're cooking up there.
Yep, that's a personal one for me. So sorry if you don't like that, but
that's fine. That's fine. Okay, Austin. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. As I said earlier, I think we could chat for hours, but I think that's probably a good point to leave it. So yeah, thanks for coming on, and yeah.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you having me on. This is fun. I love to talk. I love to talk crypto. So if anyone wants to ping me on Twitter or DM me, just feel free. I think I don't even know my screen name, but it's Bandalof, Bandalof 17, if I'm not mistaken. And
audience, you know what to do. Spam him. I'm joking. Okay, well, cheers for that, Austin. Bye now, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
All right, cheers. Thanks, guys.
That's all for this week. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.